morning and good afternoon to my viewers. This video is Juli Astrology, and it's an unpicked election with the ascendant ruled by Mars that is in Leo, and the midheaven just so happened to be on Regulus. The moon is in 25 degrees Virgo on the 11th house, and its ruler Mercury in the 8th house in Gemini, 26 degrees. That's pretty much the chart of where we begin. And without further ado, this is Sol Day, Sunday, with a Mercury hour. So without further ado, let's begin with July astrology. So, Juli. And this is astrosig.com. And with July, the sun is ruled by the moon, and I'm going to begin with, this is still June, thank you. I'm going to begin with the moon and the lunations, okay? So we start the month with the moon in Sagittarius, okay? Only on July 2nd, the moon enters Capricorn. So we start the month with an optimistic location of the moon that is a growing moon. On July 3rd, we already have the full moon in Capricorn. And on July 17th, we will have the new moon in Cancer. Okay, so the sun is in Cancer for most of the month. The lunations are on the Capricorn and Cancer axis. And I'm actually, I'm going to tackle the lunations as we reach them. So what I'm going to do actually is go by the moon, okay? And why would I do that? Because there are many ways to do a forecast. One of the ways to do a forecast, because the moon is the closest to the earth, and the moon, we feel the most what the moon is triggering, okay? Again, of course, there is perfection here. There are transits, and does it meet our personal planets, and so on and so forth. On a general level, when we want to bring the effect of the planets into the Earth, we basically rely on where the moon is in order to do that. So we start the month with the moon in 9 degrees Sagittarius, or the moon in Sagittarius. And this moon basically squares Saturn, squares a retrograde Saturn. This means that as of the 1st of July, we're going to have another triggering of the Saturn retrograde in Pisces. Okay, so for the Saturn stationing, I don't need to tell you what we had. We had the implosion of basically a submarine that delved to meet the Titanic, and unfortunately met the Titanic more closely than they expected, and which was a bunch of billionaire people that were going on this adventure, knowing the risks, and eventually, unfortunately, there was this disaster, and they all went with the submarine. And on the other side, we had a ship that had 500 refugees drowning, okay? And they were not let out, okay? It's not only that the ship was drowning, it's that they locked the place where the refugees were, and they did not let them out. And this was a complete genocide, okay? It's 500 people. It's, of course, on purpose, not because the ship was drowning on purpose, but because they were kept on purpose to die. And then we had this equivalent of these two ships when both ended up tragically. One had the entire team of I think the US Marine services to try to assist, to try to save, to try to do what they can, and they were not successful. And on the other case, of course, zip, nada. Not only that, the people were locked to death. Both of those happened on Saturn stationing to go retrograde, and now when the moon is triggering Saturn retrograde, we can expect, in a hard aspect, we can expect certain events to do with the ocean. Yes, they can be drowning. It's not like, I would not advise you to bathe in the ocean at this time. Yes, there can be unfortunately, certain healthcare crises can also happen as well. And because of the nature of Pisces and the nature of Neptune that is also in Pisces, there can be a lot of misinformation. One thing to keep in mind concerning Russia, there is the Neptune-Saturn thing to do. We heard about it both from Dan Waits, from Austin Kapak, that just did a great rendition of the next 6 months on Rune Soup, mentioning again the relation between Saturn and Neptune and Russia. So any triggering of that can trigger certain events to do with Russia, the structure in Russia. And therefore, I suspect that that can also be to do with regime. I don't know, coup, trying to revolt, trying to this, trying to that, or certain things with the rulers. Okay, I don't know what, but something is going to be triggered there on a mundane level. It's very likely. Okay, so we said ocean, marine crisis, not the best time to go swimming, even though it is summer. And we said healthcare system, so healthcare crisis, this virus, that virus, misinformation, not misinformation, pandemic, not pandemic, or the structure of the WHO, okay, World Health Organization. So certain things to do with that. And as well, a country that is very affected by the cycles of Neptune and Saturn, that is Russia, and certain things to do with Russia internally that can affect also externally. Or that can happen from, like, it can happen from external, it can happen internally, I don't know. So this is the first passage of the moon. This is what it does. As you can see, we have a lot here in the chart, but if I look at what is pinpointed, this moon is pinpointed. And now let's just begin to animate this chart. And we get to the next day moon still in Sagittarius, but already applying to square Neptune. Neptune right now is not doing very much. Okay, Neptune is sextiling Pluto, and both of them are not making any particular aspect. There is this inconjunct to Mars, okay? Mars is in conjunct in Pluto. It is not shown here. It's the 150 degrees. So that can be an issue. So Mars is, yes, and Mars is also in conjunct in Pluto. It's also in conjunct in Neptune. So the moon here is squaring Neptune and trining Venus, Mars, and Lilith. This is quite a risky day for a military activity, because Mars is military activity, and the sun here that rules this Mars is in 10 degrees Cancer with Mercury. So it can be something we will hear about in the news, some military action, that on a mundane level. Again, the hard aspect to Neptune signifies that it's again triggering this Neptune, Saturn, which is Russia. But Neptune is also about things going missing, misinformation, missing aircraft. Okay, why? Because Mars is weapon, and it can be missing military aircraft, missing military ammunition. So certain things we need to pay attention to what is missing, and Neptune is also retrograde here. Okay, so this is the day when Neptune goes already retrograde, And this is a good time to take a break and talk about Mercury retrograde. Okay, if you have the, I don't think I can write. Yeah, I cannot write here live, but no, it just gives me YouTube, this recursive loop. But it's 10:14. So Neptune retrograde. When Neptune goes retrograde, basically anything to do with where it's been, just like any retrograde, we're going to revisit it, rethink it. Neptune is to do with fluidity. Okay, this both means rethinking how we treat the oceans. If we are environmentals or marine biologists or whatnot, then rethinking those things, revisiting certain events. You know, we had several incidents of to do with marine life. One of them in the Middle East was the seal Julia that visited Gaza, Israel, Lebanon, Turkey, and you know the symbolism of, like, as far as Julia is concerned, she just goes to the beach. She doesn't care if it is Gaza, if it is Tel Aviv, if it is Turkey, if it is Lebanon. She doesn't care about what, like, she just goes to swim and then she goes to the shore to rest. And this whole, you know, the way that she was treated and she was helped back into the water, and the symbolism of Neptune, of the lack of boundaries. Okay, we have it also on air, but we also have it in the ocean. Okay, as far as marine life is concerned, they don't care what is the name of the country of the shore that they land in. Okay, they need to rest. They're gonna come to the shore that has the best temperature for them for now. So that was quite an interesting story. We might be revisiting some of these stories. We might be rethinking some of these stories. In this case, they can be like you have to take care of a certain marine life, and then there is a borders issue suddenly that, you know, can, you know, let's say Israel, Gaza. Okay, so let's say Julia is hurt in Gaza and they need to get her to a hospital. Okay, now of course it has to be an Israeli hospital. How do they transfer Julia from Gaza to Israel? Okay, good help to Julia, but you know, the seal. But that is the type of things that we might be revisiting with these stories. And yes, there were also these, you know, orcas attacking ships. I think, oh, there was this case in Italy where a person of the Secret Services, actually, there was a party of the people of the Secret Services and some, I don't know if it was orcas or whatnot, but they attacked this ship and the people died. So we might be revisiting those things. There may be a need to address these issues differently, or we're going to see different events regarding to those things. Another thing to do with fluidity is that we can have a retraction of fluidity. I don't necessarily think this is tsunami, although because the ocean is fluid and Mercury and Neptune retrograde is basically retracting fluid. Okay, so what happens in the tsunami waves? At first, there is this retraction of the sea. Okay, the sea, it kind of looks like the shore is getting bigger and deeper into the sea, and this is how it's very dangerous, because, you know, when you see that, you must escape, because then the person, then the wave of the tsunami is going to come back, but it's going to go all the way into not only the shore, but whatever is deep inside the land. And this happens usually due to earthquake. This is why I'm saying not necessarily tsunami, because I don't see anything particularly here. Although you must understand that Venus is going to be exactly square Uranus in Taurus, and Venus is already in her shade period. I would be more concerned about the release from the exact aspect between Mars and Uranus in regarding to that, which I think we already had, I'm not sure. Because when that aspect is being released, catch this explosiveness, and with the earth, when there's pressure being released, that's the earthquake. Okay, it's pressure being released from the crust, from the inner crust of the earth. And so for Venus, I'm less concerned that that's how it's going to manifest. But because Venus is the ruler of Uranus, squaring Uranus, it can be, and and this is, and she is aspecting, she's trining the moon here. It can be, okay, and therefore there can be tsunami, but not necessarily anything of that sort. I'm more concerned, like I said, about military actions. With A-bombs, there is an in conjunction between Mars and Neptune and Mars and Pluto, okay? A nuclear disaster of a certain scale, I'm not saying a grand scale, it's not particularly triggered by current eclipse at this moment in time. I think we're pretty much between the shades of eclipses. Maybe we are, with the April, and then we had one in April, I think, and then I don't know. Okay, but it was Ketu with Mars, so there's still a bit of a chance for some A-bombs to go off, some nuclear disaster, and this nuclear disaster can be on land, and it can also be in the ocean. Okay, I'm not saying anything like it's not like the earth is going to explode, but some things of the sort, and I don't remember how many years ago there were some A-bombs exploding in the ocean. I don't remember exactly where, by whom, when, what, but that caused a lot of turmoil, a lot of earthquakes, a lot of tsunamis. So that's something of that sort. And of course, there can be misinformation all around us. Maybe it won't be even reported. But that is something that can happen on yes, it can happen. Okay, so more positive things with this aspect. Well, there can be unusual actions, unusual activism, environmental activism that is perhaps provocative, that has to do with both the environment and marine life, or just it can be something like that, that is perhaps more entertaining in its nature because of the Leo, Venus in Leo, Mars in Leo. It can be something of that sort. Okay. Of course, on your personal lives during this time, so it's not a good time to start a relationship, you understand that. Next day, the moon is in still growing, and the moon is in Capricorn, and this would be the day of the full moon in Capricorn. Okay, so let's look at the aspects. The moon is trining Jupiter in Taurus, and Jupiter is no longer within the hold of Pluto. So this is a very potent Jupiter. Is far enough from Rahu. It's not being threatened in any way, shape, or form, but the ruler is on the 22nd degree. And so this is the 22nd degree. Nicolas Stoyanovich, this is Nicolas Stoyanovich, is the degree of to kill or be killed. But it doesn't mean that necessarily it's going to manifest as killing. It can also mean that there are going to be certain songs, certain stories to do with like crime thrillers and stuff like that. It can also mean that such stories can make a lot of money, okay, with Jupiter in Taurus. So people might be tending to read, to watch, to listen to stories about kind of a murder she wrote. Okay, this can be a murder she wrote. They can be with the 22 degrees, like I said, it's to kill or be killed, and that can also be women who are killers. Okay, so people might be interested in women who are killers and so on and so forth. But yes, there is also the danger for women to get killed. So this is a bit of an issue here. Mercury is conjuncting the Sun in Cancer, middle phase of Cancer. and opposing the moon. And this is something that the minute I see it, and I think I already reviewed this lunation, the communication, what you feel and how you talk about it are at odds. Because the conflict between how you feel inside and what you say. It's kind of like you want to tell to a person, I love you, and you say, I can't stand you. But you mean it as a joke, but they don't get it that way. It's like, oh, I can't stand you. But they don't get it that way. They get offended. Okay, especially when the moon is in Capricorn, so your anxiety and so on and so on. You wanted to confess your love, and they now are thinking that you mock them, that you and you genuinely just meant it as a joke, but now I say no, you're gaslighting, and you know it can be something like that. It can it just means that communication, the relation between communication and what we are trying to communicate emotionally is not there. Or there can be that we communicate certain truths because the sun is there, certain truths about emotion, but in a way that is unfortunately emotionally cold. Okay, it's kind of like the person who tells you the brutal truth. It can also be a truth in this case, tells you the brutal truth, but what about the kindness? What about the compassion? It is not there in the voice, in the tonality. So that can be a quite annoying lunation, okay? And it's a full moon, so it's time to release something. And Jupiter sextiling, so it can be like, this is actually a time where truth is communicated, but not in the most compassionate way. Okay, and Saturn is also trining the Sun and Mercury to a certain degree. It's a separating aspect, and sextiling the Moon, again separating aspect. So this means that it can be a culmination, a final release of certain communication, certain relation, even certain psychological patterns due to a certain truth that is said harshly. Okay, a bit harshly or in emotional outburst, or with lack of emotion, okay, in the tone. Kind of like a cold hard truth. But Saturn is retrograde, so it's a reflection. It can be like some harsh truth is said. When Saturn will be direct, we'll see it's not the final picture, but the words have already been said. Okay, the words have already been said, and now it's kind of like because of the emotional effect, it's more difficult to take that back. Okay, you could see that, yeah, that was true, but there is also another truth here. But now that the words have been said, you can't retract them, and you need to work with what you said. Okay. But you are very likely, words are very likely to be spoken with this one. Okay, and perhaps it is fated for them to be spoken. This signifies to me that on a deeper level, some relations need to be killed. Okay, it's not some people that need to be killed, there's some connections, especially with Venus in her shade, some connection need to be killed. Okay, so now, enough of this. Enough of this, and this is more personal, you can take it to your personal life, okay? Enough of this relation, enough of this friendship, enough of this connection. This connection has to be dead, and it can be for many reasons, and therefore it can be that there is miscommunication or communication that is like a brutal truth, but and you see like, well, I was not being so kind with this person. It's like, it's not the whole truth. They're also a beautiful person, they're also this, they're also that, but eventually enough of that. It's good for both of you to separate, to sever ties. Okay, Mars here, to sever ties, and that can be unfortunately heartbreaking. Okay, so who are the ascendants for whom it's going to be most susceptible to happen as partnership? Those are Leo and Aquarius ascendants. For Aquarius especially, because it's happening in their 7th house, so it can mean that, or if you are Capricorn or Cancer rising, it kind of means that certain words are said, certain things are said. It's like, okay, something here is no go, like enough of that. So, and that can be kind of a cold, harsh truth in relation to these things. This is for the lunation. Next day. So next day, the moon is still in Capricorn. And sextile, okay, applying to conjunct Pluto. And of course to sextile Neptune. And to trine, and separating from a trine to Uranus. So this particular point, even though the moon is supposedly, okay, it will be touching Mercury earlier, but other than that, this is a waning moon, and it touches on all the outer planets. Now, how are we going to experience that? What I believe is through nature, and I don't mean natural disasters. Okay, the weather can actually be fine, it's harmonious aspects. The weather can actually be quite good. But there's something of the signification of those outer planets that the moon is bringing. So the moon is bringing awareness to changes that need to take place on a material level, Uranus and Taurus, to structural changes that we still have to update, Pluto in Capricorn, and to the effect of all of this on marine life, on the ocean, on anything fluid, which is including finances, okay? Fluidity is also finances, and healthcare, and so on and so forth. So it's a very, you're gonna get something on an emotional level that is of the spirit of the time. You might be able to channel something relative to these things that is of the spirit of the times. And that's pretty much what the moon is doing. On to the next day. And the next day we already have the moon ingressing into Aquarius. With the ingress, it squares Jupiter. So now we're going from the trine to Jupiter to the inconjunct to the square to Jupiter. And moon squaring Jupiter, it basically it means that it brings the energy of Jupiter to the Earth. Okay. Again, Venus is in her shade period. She's applying to conjunct Mars. Not a time I would consecrate anything that I want to be talismanic. But there are certain joys that we can still enjoy here. It's just that we can't count on longevity of these joys. Okay, it can be the joy of the body, the joy of a meal. It can be some income, some growth in income, and all of those things are possible. They're transient, and it's all in all, it's a good aspect. Okay, it's not a terrible aspect. The next day, so it's a Thursday, 6th July, the moon is still in Aquarius and applies to the Deneb Gedi, while opposing Venus and Mars. Okay, so here's the thing, it's not a good time to consecrate anything for Deneb Algedi. Deneb Algedi has to do with safeguarding boundaries, both on a material level and on a spiritual level. So guard against psychic attack and guarding your property, fair success in business, okay? But because there is an opposition here to Mars, we're gonna get these energies, and it's a hard aspect. So certain things can be broken, and here it's hard, or even the eyes. Okay, certain damage to the eyes. So we want to avoid this particular consecration, but we will have the moon triggering Venus and Mars in Leo. Okay, it can be relationship drama. They can be romance. I'm not saying it's impossible for there to be romance, but again, you have to understand the moon is the way we feel safe. So if it is opposing Venus or Mars, then the way we feel and our, like, what we need to feel safe and what sensually arouses us are opposites, okay, which is very intricate. So even for a short term, like a one night stand, it can be quite intricate. It can be something that you might not feel that good the day after. And it can be very manifesting aspect because we have a T-square with Uranus. On a mundane level, there can be certain explosions in the air with this one, okay? Because although Mars is very separating from Uranus, it's not impossible that some aircraft explodes or some explosion in the air. There can be fires in the forests. It's still the season, so it is possible. Yeah, so would you date someone on a day like that? And I think but then you can be very attracted, you can be very excited, something is very exciting. It is much best to deal with creatively, is to start a creative project. It can be painting, performing, poetry slam. Poetry slam is great for this. And something of that sort. For activism, I would not do anything here with this Venus in her shade period, because you will need to redo it and then redo it again, So but it's going to be very manifesting. So if you're put in a certain position, maybe you're going to have to speak up or act out. But then you will need to readdress this and then readdress this again when Venus goes retrograde and then when she goes direct again. So, next explanation. Moon conjuncts Saturn. So Moon ingresses into Pisces on the 7th of July, Friday here, depending on where you are. And it's going to sextile Jupiter, and it's going to apply to trine the Sun. But first, it's going to conjunct a retrograde Saturn. And this is another activation of anything that I said about the Saturn-Neptune. Okay, so Russia, okay, not a good time to go to the ocean. If you're planning on meeting the Titanic, then postpone it on another day if you wish to come back. Unfortunately, things like refugees, crises with refugees, that can also happen. Healthcare issues, pandemic, virus, not virus, whatnot, that can also happen. With this particular one, I do not think so much a natural disaster or like an earthquake, because it's not triggered by anything. Uranus is sextiling Mercury. It's more like a certain news or certain slander or a certain provocation. So some communication is provocative, but not necessarily a natural disaster of the sort of that involves an earthquake or that involves the earth, or even that involves the air. Okay, so mainly it's not a good time to be at the ocean, but other than that, it's not something that I see as especially triggering. But of course, because Neptune is sextile in Pluto, and Pluto is on the sign of the land, okay, it's on the 29th degree of Capricorn, there's always the risk of some nuclear leaking of energy. This is not nuclear explosion in this case, so much as like a Chernobyl, okay? And again, it doesn't mean that this will happen, but those are the various things that can happen whenever the moon is triggering this, and that needs to be said. As the moon progresses in Pisces, it's going to trine the Sun and then trine Mercury in Cancer. Although Mercury in Cancer is not the happiest, because it's supposed to communicate about emotions, but Mercury is always communicating the moon. On a natal chart, with Mercury, what do you communicate? You communicate what you think, how you feel, okay? Memory affects how you think, memory, moon, and so on and so forth. So, Mercury, but Mercury in Cancer is kind of like throwing, you try to communicate, but you are inside the water, and you need a bit distance in order to communicate what you're feeling. However, the moon is assisting. Okay, the moon is assisting, and there can be a bit of relief in communication. And however, the moon is applying to conjunct Neptune. So anybody that has this Neptune harsh aspecting any of their, personal planets with the moon triggering it, this is a good time to do your self-care if you're dealing with any addictive patterns, okay? Whatever helps you when you have not a relapse, but kind of a couple of hours that are more difficult, or a day that is more difficult, then for this day prepare, okay? And see what can you do, or make sure that your routines that help you to kind of ease yourself when you are in these situations, when you're tempted to do something that you're addicted to, then you might need those for the rescue for that day. And perhaps words that describe emotions can be of that resource. July 9th, Moon in Aries. So Moon is void, of course. It's not making any aspects. I'm not going to go into just how long is the moon void, of course, but moon void, of course, basically is where the moon is not making any traditional aspects to any planet, and that leaves us with a moon that is all alone. It means that actions that are taken place at this time, the action that you take at this time, may be relevant for the significant period that the moon is where it's at, but it might not continue. It might not bring more things into fruition, which may or may not be what you want, okay? It can be a time where you, mostly it's a time where you need to self-care, when you need to kind of not take things too serious, like not take on you too much burden. That is what void of course moons mean. And then it applies on the next day, it applies to conjunct Chiron, as it applies to square Mercury. So conjunction with Chiron steers a certain wound in us. Chiron in Aries means Aries is ruling the head, is ruling the sense of self. Okay, so that can be embarrassment about the self, even if it's not your ascendant. Okay, it can mean Aries can be your ninth house, and then what you are embarrassed about has to do with your worldview, or your shy that you have this religious view, or maybe you haven't had a worldview and you're kind of like unsure about this, and there's a wound there. Okay, that sense of self that's connected with whatever Chiron in Aries brings is wounded, and the moon touches on this wound. So while it can be a time of healing, it's also a time where you definitely need to be more tender with yourself, although Aries is exactly the opposite of Venus, so tenderness is a bit difficult to come by. With this, or perhaps radical acceptance that this just happens can be of help. And then the moon will apply to square Mercury again. This is not a good time to have any communication that you want to bring something from. Okay, so if you know that, let's say you talk with someone, and they must talk to you and say, okay, listen, I feel this is not the best time to speak about these things, and so I feel it's best that we postpone this conversation. If they absolutely disagree, say you must tell you that this is not the best time for me to speak about this topic. If you can't say it at all, because with this square already in effect, it will be very difficult to say things correctly. Now, the moon is going over, as it ingresses to Taurus, is going over Rahu. Rahu is literally 4 minutes away from ingressing into 29 degrees of Aries. Okay, this is probably this, I don't know if it's the last day of Rahu in Taurus, with the moon going over it. Now, the moon going over on Rahu in Taurus in itself, it's not an eclipse. But we might feel more of the significations of the moon. Here, the moon is in Taurus. It's exalted. Okay, it's the water meets the land. It's very nourishing aspect. Um, it does apply to sextile Saturn, so it can be enduring things. It's a waning moon, so certain completion is about to take place. And this moon is also trining the Mars that is just ingressed into Virgo. Um, so this also means we're now dealing with the Virgo Mars, and this moon squares 0 degrees Leo Mercury. Okay, so we have two planets change sign other than the moon. We have Mars that's ingressing from Leo into Virgo. Mars in Virgo, okay, so Mars is they can be military action on land because Virgo is mutable land and Mars is military action. Okay, there can be some military action on land. Other than that, there can be a sense of drive or a sense of action, taking action around your health. Can also be, taking action around your health, cutting off certain foods that are not good for you. This can also be with this aspect, and the moon triggering it favors it. If it's detox, it's good for detox because the moon is waning. So detox is something that you might, although with the moon in Taurus, you actually might crave certain foods, but maybe you will choose the fruits that are good for you rather than processed sugars or something like that. And the Mercury ingressing into Leo. Okay, so Mercury goes from being overly emotional to being incredibly passionate. Both are not the best places to communicate. Okay, and this Mercury also opposes Pluto. Unfortunately, Mercury is journalism, it's judges, it's traders, it's youth, children, it's public transportation, it's technology. All of these things can have an experience of disempowerment, okay, with this ingress. Later, better, but now the ingress, because it opposes Pluto, a certain regulation over these things, but there can also be, we need to protect children at this time of this ingress. Next day. So Moon is going to conjunct Jupiter, and as it does, it's applying to sextile the Sun. It's not, very tight orb, but it's quite a sweet conjunction where the Moon is kind of going over Jupiter in Taurus. Again, the ruler Venus is very much in her shade. It's in 26 degrees Leo. It's not that Venus in Leo is bad. It's just that if you have something sweet and tender and on this time, it's much preferred that you don't rely on that being a forever thing. And if you do take it, that sweet moment at the time, although Venus in Leo is fixed, she wants something long term. And there could be the conflict. Okay, something is not a good aspect just because that Venus is in her shade period. She's going to go retrograde. It's going to go direct again. It can be something very sweet that happens in your life. Can be like a relationship or even a creative project that you make money from. And that it is good as long as this is transient, because if you rely on it forever here, I'm not saying this absolutely cannot be, but it's very much against the odds of this transit, because you are about to go through a certain purging of your relational patterns to do with visibility, and that means you might be attracted to different forms, or it also means that you think about the visibility of relationship. You think about all those Instagram couples or content creators that are couples. This can very much be this thing, and it can be that you start some creative project with someone, but the moon is waning, okay? But because it is so sweet, you would like to do it. You would like to take some photos together, to put it on social media, to record some shorts together, to do a scene together, to sing a song together. But then one of you might want to take it down, and then one of you, maybe you will separate, or maybe you will not separate, and one of you will want to not appear so much on social media. And it can be really something like that, as simple as that. It's not a big deal, but it can also mean that Venus wants something fixed, and she's right now in her shade period where she's rethinking what is that fixed thing that she wants. Okay, so while it's a very sweet day, great to do creative stuff, great to do a creative project, to perform, to sing songs, to cook a delicious meal, like a royal meal or something like that. Great time. Seize the moment here. Okay, but the thing, and if you want something that will last for long, then paint something, then that will be fixed. Okay, that will be, but maybe you will later say, oh, I don't like this type of painting, or so on and so forth. So that's the thing. And then the moon will conjunct Uranus. Uranus is now on the 22nd degrees in Taurus, and this is, even without anything in itself, it's disturbing. Okay, like I said, 22nd degree is a degree to do with the Murder, She Wrote. Okay, and when it's not a Beyonce having an album and having a song about, whatnot, this can actually mean things to do with death. And it can be death due to natural disaster. And yeah, this Uranus is very much square in Lilith and still square in Venus. Okay, it's somewhat sextiling. It's sextiling the sun. There can be upheavals. Women's rights, things to do with women, rebellions to do with women, even LGBTQ, stuff like that. And some leaders, maybe populist leaders that are women, people revolt against them, or they do the revolt, I don't know. But it's a bit of a day to, like, it's not, some unexpected goods can come from that, but it's just something uneasy going on here. For the state of Israel is already very much beginning to, Uranus is very much beginning to apply, to tightly conjunct Israel's sun. Being a person who currently resides in Israel, I don't find myself looking forward to this particular conjunction in this particular part of Taurus, but that's life. And then we will go over Algol, and then ingress into Gemini, where it's conjunct in Sedna. Moon trining Pluto and sextiling Mercury. Moon trining Pluto sextiling Mercury can ease a bit the tension here between news, children, and regulation, regime, plutocracy. Okay, there's a slight relief, but then the moon will ingress into Gemini and conjunct Sedna, which is, again, anytime the moon conjuncts Sedna, we may hear of what we call Sedna stories. This is a time, if you're working in any way with Sedna and worshiping Sedna, this is a time to honor Sedna, and to pay tribute to Inuit culture, because Sedna is an Inuit goddess, that can be a way to cope with this. On a mundane level, yeah, this we can hear certain stories in the news that are unpleasant, but also certain stories to do with Sedna stories, like children deciding to revolt, being overthrown by the father or something like that, by the parent. Then the moon will square Saturn. And this is the third time that the moon is triggering the aspect of Saturn retrograde in Pisces. Anything to do with that now, Mars is going to oppose this Saturn. Okay, anything to do with this aspect, like I said, Russia, marine life, healthcare, pandemic, all these things are going to be reignited. Okay, we have another episode of the story. And the moon goes over Aldebaran here. Because of the square to Saturn, it's not the time to consecrate anything. Yeah. If you're wondering, is it a good time to do Algol or to do Sedna work? Perhaps yes. Okay, I haven't checked it thoroughly, but you might need to check it yourself, and perhaps yes. Perhaps those are the type of magical workings that you can do this month. But with Algol, less preferably so, because Venus is already in her shade. You better rely on previous work you did with Algol. Moon in 24 degrees Gemini, Moon Gemini. Oh, Moon in Gemini will be applying to square Neptune and sextile Venus. So we have this in conjunct between Venus and Neptune. When Venus is still in her shade, not retrograde yet, and the moon sextile in Venus, but square in Neptune. Okay, artistic work. What can you do with this? Artistic work. And if you are dealing with any kind of addiction, then perhaps singing, voicing yourself, performing poetry can help you at this time. And Sunday, 16 Juli, Moon ingressing into Cancer, trine in Saturn, sextile in Mars. Moon trine in Saturn is good. It's a time to reflect. Now, this is a time, when you see those videos, I also done such video about Saturn retrograde in Pisces as reflecting upon the time of Saturn in Pisces, correcting things. This is a great time to reflect. What can I do? What can I try anew? What can I change in regards to my Pisces house? And that's a great time to do these changes, and to not to do these changes, but more to reflect, to meditate on it. And maybe you'll get the feeling of what's next, what is best for you at this time. So this is actually not a bad aspect. It's an aspect that can help you be reflective, and perhaps even take calculated action. Mars in Virgo, calculated action to fix those things that you need to fix. And we're approaching the next lunation. Moon is applying to conjunct the Sun. So new moon in Cancer, I believe it will be in 24-degree Cancer. And this will oppose Pluto. And trine Neptune. So this is a great time where you can have an artistic new beginning. But you must understand that if you want to make money from what you create now, there will be an issue with the plutocracy, okay? Maybe taxation, how to register it, how to copyright. It's a good for a creative beginning. Okay, it's a new moon in Cancer. Cancer is very creative. It's a cardinal sign, and you can make wonderful artistic work, and it's a good thing to do so. Neptune in Pisces really helps you. It can be very spiritual effect on you, but you must take this new beginning as a place where you are more spiritually inclined than financially inclined. Okay, because here the regulation opposing, there's an issue of power that you need to face if you start something today. and Pluto retrograde. Okay, it's not some project that I can say, oh, you can make a new creative project and then you can sell something and then you can this. The creation that you make right now, or you can do some creation that right now is private but later will be exposed, because Pluto is like pregnancy. Okay, is hidden but then exposes things. So perhaps you start something now that is hidden and then you will expose it in 6 months. That can be another aspect that gives Pluto a place, but still it's an opposition. So power dynamics can be involved here. And so intense emotions, okay? Pluto is intensity, moon, emotion, sun, emotions. So it can be something you create in this way. But I seriously consider setting intention for that to have more of a spiritual value rather than relying on getting money from this. So yeah. Moon ingressing into Leo, still in the opposition to Pluto, and trining Neptune. And the moon will apply to conjunct Mercury. So let's see, let's go to the next lunar mansion. Moon is conjuncting Mercury, and then it is square in Jupiter. Mercury is how we communicate, Jupiter is what we believe in. So there's tension between what we believe in and what we communicate. Okay, the moon on this point accentuates on this, so certain words will be said, but there are certain beliefs, or it can be a bit of words that are unorthodox. Okay, so unorthodoxy perhaps can express itself here. It's not a bad aspect. Okay, it can be a bit of a tension, but it's not necessarily anything terrible. The sun, that is the ruler of this conjunction, is opposing Pluto, and so there can be religious disputes, okay, due to performance, due to satire even. Okay, Mercury Leo is performative. It can be think about what Mercury is, can be jokes. Okay, and jokes, and Leo is performance, so jokes about celebrities, jokes about kings, and that can get into difficulty with the plutocracy. Okay, because of some jokes. So not the easiest time for freedom of expression. July 20th, 25 degrees Leo. Okay, the moon will be conjuncting Lilith, and thereby square in Uranus again. Okay, now with Venus degrees away, minutes away from turning retrograde. So Venus in 28 degrees. Well, this is a very it's like a Kundalini awakening. Okay, Lilith, that is like the gut instinct. Think about basic instinct, Sharon Stone kind of moments. But Uranus is still sitting pretty on the degrees of the 22 degree. Okay, it can be, it can be like a basic instinct movie. But then unfortunately, even with Sharon Stone, we saw that certain things weren't exactly willingly consensual from her. So it's those kind of intricacies that can happen during filmmaking, during creation, during performance. And there is this something unusual, but Uranus is the kill here. Okay, something perhaps trying to revolt, or a certain woman performer is trying to revolt, but consent is not completely kept here. Okay, it's kind of like a very dramatic, very entertaining moment, but there's just something about this moment that is not the way it was. It's unpredictable, and in a way that is killing it, not in a way that is reviving it. Okay, think about you're telling a joke, and that joke turns out to be a sexual offense, and that's in no way funny. It doesn't make people laugh anymore. Okay, so I just don't know exactly how will, because it's Uranus again, and it's that degree. So it can be as simple as some satire to do with what if, women responded to social changes like men, and the way women would run around killing people and raping people and whatnot. And it can be like a satire about this, or unfortunately, there can be some events that are unpleasant. Yeah. And they can happen to the Venusian, or they can be performed by the Venusian. Venusian in Leo can be also the performer of a certain act of rebellion. And the Sun here is still applying to oppose Neptune. So, applying to oppose Pluto. Okay, so it's kind of like an artistic revolution. Here, that can, unfortunately, there's something there that's taken more seriously, is done more seriously. Then Moon ingresses into Virgo. Okay, because 0 degrees Virgo now in conjunction with Pluto, and with Neptune, and because it applies to oppose Saturn, then we don't get the Regulus. We don't get the Regulus harvest for this. Regulus is the royal star of fame and good fortune, but we don't get to honor Regulus in a benefic way in here. So you might want to bring up Regulus work that you have for previous times, but it's not the best to make a new one now. Other than that, Moon ingressing into Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury, and then it will oppose Saturn and conjunct Mars. So it will go over Venus, we talked about this, and then conjuncting Mars in Virgo, opposing this Saturn. So Russia military action for sure. Sneezing it's funny, in Judaic tradition, sneezing actually means truth. But when I spoke with an Indian astrologer, they said that sneezing is when you cross to a certain place. Then if you sneeze, then you need to go back to the place that you were and let the third eye adjust itself, and then only then go out, even if you want to go out of the house. Because sneezing tells you that you're not done adjusting your third eye. But in Judaic tradition, sneezing says truth. Like if I say something and I sneezed on it, then it means that this is true. So, I don't know. Yes, military action in Russia, the 6th degree. I don't know particularly what is the 6th degree denoting. Perhaps this is the time that you want to go over, if you're learning Nicola Stojanovich's degree theory, you want to go over the 6th degree. Especially if you are Pisces ascendant, Virgo ascendant, Gemini ascendant, Sagittarius ascendant, this is meaningful in your life because it means some action that has long-term implication. Okay, some action is taken that has long-term implication. Mars opposing Saturn is very intense. Okay, and it can also mean blocked action. Okay, so it can be frustration. It's not going to last forever, but it means that if you do something on this day, then it will have this imprint, which is not a benefic one. Okay, so even though the moon is growing and it's also visible, I would avoid doing things or trying to see how can this action actually be. If you're not a martial artist where you can just work out in a way that you already know how to work with this energy, maybe consume a Mars herb in a tea, because Pisces is fluid, it's also holistic, energetic medicine, and Virgo is herbal. So Mars herb, it can be anything that has needles or pies, or I think even milk thirstle, because milk thirstle is to do also with the moon and with Mars. So moon Mars herb in a tea, which by the way I'm drinking today quite a lot of. So It's Moon Mars in a tea, and Saturn rules agriculture. Also, you can eat sushi, okay, with seaweeds. Okay, if you eat sushi with seaweeds, you're eating something that is of, but you want to be careful with the fish that you won't have like viruses with them because the Saturn retrograde. So you want to make sure that the fish is good. But if you're eating vegan sushi with the seaweeds, because the sea, you want to have something that is a herb that grows in the sea. That's basically seaweed, and you can eat that. While it may not be the most, you might not absorb the most from it because it is Saturn and Mars. However, it is a good remedy to do so and to direct the energy. But this is according to Nicolas Stojanovich's remedial theory. It is not according to astrological magic, because in astrological magic, it would actually mean that you are consuming this energy, which you don't want to do. Okay, but according to Nicolas Stoyanovich, you're actually doing something with this energy, that you're directing it where, so it will go to, the Mars thing is, let's say, spicy mayo, and the Saturn thing is some herb that grows in the sea. Oh, that's the seaweed, and then you eat that as food. You cook that yourself, and this is Virgo Pisces remedy. Okay, so this is the difference between those type of remedies to consecrating a talisman, which basically means I'm putting this energy in this talisman and I want to work with this energy, rather than I'm directing this energy into something that the energy will go there and not go to some places that I don't want it to go, which is more the Nicolas Stoyanovich way. So that's a tiny class of remediation. And the moon is continuing to trine Jupiter. And it will trine Jupiter from the lunar mansion called Al-Awa, which is a quite erotic one, quite potent one, a good time for semen. Okay, it's a good time for semen. You do have to be cautious not to get pregnant with this one, because the moon on the degree of union and trining Jupiter, that literally is semen, both are the signals of fertility. And even though the ruler Mercury is in a fire sign, hard aspect in this Jupiter, yeah, that might mean conception. So if you want to have conception, perhaps this is good for you. But if you don't like to have conception, then you can use this for some nice, good kinky sex, for some sowing seeds, because the moon is growing. This is a good time to sow seeds, particularly sow seeds, especially if you want to grow sweet fruits. Okay, because Jupiter in Taurus, something sweet. Okay, if you want to harvest sweet herbs, sweet fruits, then sowing such seeds is supposed to be good at this time. And do this before the moon reaches the 17th degree if you want to get the El Awa lunar mansion, because the Mercury will be, if you get the ascendant on Virgo, Mercury will be in the 12th house, so it will be difficult for you to do, let's say, lunar mansion talisman of the 13th lunar mansion, this El Awa. But if you get the ascendant, if you get the ascendant on Sagittarius, you get Jupiter in the 6th, which is not what we want. If you get the ascendant on Pisces, then you get then you get this in the 7th, okay, and Jupiter in the 3rd. If you can do that, and it's not like the middle of the night for you, and it works for your region, then perhaps you can do an Al-Awa lunar mansion talisman, which can be quite good. Yes, no horrors for this. Yes, there is Mars in Virgo, but Mars is already in Alawa. Mars is already in Alawa, I think. No, yes, it's already in Alawa. So Mars is co-present with the moon and is opposing Saturn. So I don't know how it will work. If you can single out the moon is far enough for Mars, maybe it will work. But this is a good time for a good time. If your Pisces ascendant, this happens in your 7th, then you have to pay attention to what I said with the remedy of Mars, because Mars can be conflict, and we want Mars to be rather the erect penis of the talisman than conflicts and fights. So yeah. Moon ingressing into Libra. Moon ingress into Libra will oppose Neptune, but it will also sextile the Sun that is already ingressing into Leo. So the Sun ingresses into Leo. And this is the beginning of Leo season. And we have a mystic rectangle in the sky here. So people born with this will be born with a mystic rectangle. It's a very transient effect here because the moon is only like less than a couple of hours we'll be holding this. But the thing about this is we have the opposition to Neptune, but we have the trine to Pluto. We have the sextile to the Sun, but we have the opposition from the Sun to Pluto. So there is this tensions and the tension and relief. Okay, this tension and relief. And those tensions and relief are combined, which can be really annoying on their nervous system as a person with a natal mystic rectangle. Okay, it's good for channeling. It's good for Sun and Moon sextile is excellent aspect. Here I have this applying aspect in my chart. It's excellent aspect to have. It means resilience. It means that there's something that in all there can be some at the essence, some harmonics between what your right eye sees and what your left eye sees. Okay, what mama thinks, what papa thinks, or what mama thinks and what mama number two thinks. And like you can see it, and this is supportive even in the most harsh conditions, speaking as you know from experience. Because this means that there are some places where, if it's the native, there are many places where your parents see eye to eye. Okay, there's a lot that connects them. They work in harmonious way together. It doesn't mean anything other than what it means. It's not a guarantee for anything. Okay, I'm a daughter of a separated parents, suppose, with this aspect. Well, you have to see other, here Moon is opposite Neptune, Sun is opposite Pluto, so yes, it can mean parents who divorce as well, especially if Uranus is involved. But it means that essentially there's something that the right eye and the left eye see eye to eye. Okay, there's something that both that parent will agree on and that parent will agree on. And this means that the two sides of your personality that are the lunar and the solar, they have something that they can agree on. So this is a very good aspect. A bit of a relief. Still, the Sun is opposing Pluto. Okay, so there still are what we call power issues. Okay. Still, the Moon is opposing Neptune. So ideation, if it is relationship, it can be ideation. This is a good aspect for channeling where it's for like artistic to enjoy, maybe even psychedelic experience. I never took psychedelics, so I wouldn't know. But when I mean psychedelics, for me, the way I imagine it is like taking a journey, which is healing. And I'm not saying take psychedelics on this. Okay, I'm saying channeling. And that can be a journey where you meet many things, and it's not about the truth value of things, but rather about the merit of the experience. Okay, so think about Moon opposing Neptune as experiencing the experience of with Venus here of ideal love. Okay, and it's not about getting married. It's about the very experience of this love is so important. But there can also be, unfortunately, like this disillusion. Oh, I cannot touch this in reality. I cannot find this in reality. It's like I long for this divine love, but I try to make it in real life. And but then even the experience of this divine love, to feel it, to experience it, to like as if it exists, is also important to experience such divine emotion. Okay. So that can be also the case. But the Sun opposed Pluto, it's more like finding your power in the face of the plutocracy. and shine, just shining your light on the plutocracy as well, exposing things, to be particular. And the moon will progresses to be void, of course, in Libra, which is a good time for self-care. Venus is already retrograde today, so Venus was stationed in retrograde. Now she is retrograde, 28 degrees of Leo. With the moon void, of course, ruled by Venus retrograde. Okay. This is where I'm of two minds. I don't know if I should tell you to smell the roses and pull up your Venus talismans to kind of support you, or if I should say, pray to God that you don't outdo yourself, because Venus is going into the underworld. And thank you, Austin Kabak. I usually am so confused with Inanna from Uruk and Eresh Kigal, and Inanna is the Venus that is above the horizon, that is the morning star. Krusty always says that, but only now when Austin said the Eresh Kigal, I was like, oh, Eresh Kigal is this Persephone. So when Venus goes retrograde, she goes into her Eresh Kigal phase, which means the goddess that goes into the underworld. And well, the way Krusty tells it, she actually tells the story of Persephone, which is basically abducted by Hades into the underworld and is raped for 6 months. So, like, there is no way to tell this to the modern viewer. It's not like, yeah, he coerces her and they have an affair. It's like, no, they don't. This is not. And Inanna from Uruk is basically, I'm not saying Aphrodite because I'm not sure which is Aphrodite. Inanna from Uruk is basically when she rises from the underworld, and now she's shining as the morning star. So I really liked what Austin Kapuk said about this on a very, like, how to apply it to your life. It means that during the time of Venus retrograde, you deal with uncomfortable emotions that you have and experiences that you have around relationships. I hope I was not misinterpreting. And that's just the way it is. You have to process this. This is the time to do your shadow work. And I don't like the word shadow work because everybody says Jung, and I cannot say Jung anymore because Sabina Spielerein is pretty much most of Jung and Freud. So if I cannot separate the two, then it's difficult. It's not that I have anything against Jung. It's just that it's like we don't hear enough Sabina for me to differentiate them. So for me, I will just say Sabina Spielerein says shadow work is the time to do when this happens during the Eresh Kigal phase, and Venus is the evening star, but she will also be invisible. And so when the moon is void, of course, it's also a time to go into your cocoon. So like you're going into your cocoon in the sign which ruler is going into her shadow phase, and that can be incredibly isolated experience. So again, I don't know if I should tell you smell the roses, but you think about the rose quartz crystal, other than the fact that most crystals are mined by children who sometimes die in the process, and you don't want to do not buy crystals because then these children will be human trafficked. And that is the story of how our rose quartzes come into being. And so when you hold a rose quartz, it's healing the heart. It's also purging. Okay, so people think, oh, rose quartz, it's the tender love. It's not. There's nothing tender about a rose quartz. Okay, it takes. You can maybe ask from it to be tender. Okay, but genuinely, you pull in all the experiences that keep your heart from being open. So of course you're crying a lot, and so be tender with yourself. If it helps for you to smell the roses, smell the. You know what? When Venus got into her shade period, I got the person where I used to buy basically the dry roses for the rose tea. They used to make like strange face, and I'm like, okay, you know. So I was like, this is funny about how Venus in her shape. And then when Venus was direct, and I was working with Venus talisman, and then suddenly he smiled and he was very kind and so on and so on. And I was like, oh, everything is okay. then last Friday, I came there. I saw him. It's like already this strange face, and I'm like, okay, this is very weird for me. I have nothing with this person. We're not sleeping together. Huh? So I just choose me, and there are many places to buy roses. So this is something that. Why am I saying this? Because it can also be significations like, oh, I tell you to smell the roses, but right now the roses are not blooming and somebody trimmed the yard where you had roses, or there's not enough roses in the store. Okay, I went to buy roses in a certain place and he said, oh, we don't have any, we only have this pack, this tiny pack. So I got some two tiny packs. um, and and that's like the story with the roses. So if it helps you to smell the roses, if it helps you to pull back your Venus talismans, okay. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I haven't tried it. I know that there's the Asclepius, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, that I'm really excited about, because Austin got to the election to work with the Ashwini Nakshatra, which is the first lunar mention, and it is about healing and this healing of the heart. So I'm like really excited about that, but I also want to buy Tamamundi. So I'm like I need the bags with the money. And I can't recommend that because I haven't tried that and it's just a prediction. But if you can get your hands on something like that, maybe you can tell me how it works, because this is a time where you're definitely going to delve into matters of the heart. Venus retrograde in Leo is Venus in the sign of the heart. Okay, and I'm not going to go into your whole Shen, heart, sight, and whatnot and how they relate, because I think I talked a lot about this and I am quite tired at this time. But that is the thing I'm thinking about. This is like pull all your self-care tools. It seems so innocent. Venus is retrograde in Leo. The moon is in Libra. Void, of course. Increasing with Venus in her shade period. I don't know if she's already invisible or about to go invisible. I need to listen to Gracia Tassio again for that. Gracia Tassio is my invisibility of the planets go-to person. I don't know how to calculate that because I don't have the program. So nobody talks about invisibility on the Hellenistic hemisphere, and I'm like, no, guys, talk about it. Not just Kazimis, just talk about invisibility, because I find it to be so useful. Anyway. And Luna on Spica. So Luna on Spica will sextile her ruler, which is retrograde. So again, if you want to honor Spica, honor Spica. I would not consecrate anything with the ruler being retrograde, because that would give us unpredictable. Spica is about speaking up and being eloquent. Okay, when the ruler is retrograde, you caught up with your food in your mouth. I don't know. It can be unpredictable. And is this the first ingress? No, the lunar nodes are already in Libra and Aries. So for those of you who are extremely energy sensitive, the moon will be conjuncting Ketu. Okay. While sextiling Mercury and sextiling Venus, purging. It's purge time. It's rethinking relationships time. It's preparing for the eclipse time. There can be a sense of like doom and gloom around Venusian things. And it's important to remember, just write a note on your wall that says, it's not the end of the story yet. It's not the whole story. Okay. Check up in 60 days for this topic of the matter, and whatever helps you endure, that is that. And of course, we have this square to Pluto. Okay, so moon squaring Pluto, emotional intensity on steroids. So don't take never mind, scrap that. But that is that's the time where you want to pull out your self-care kit. It's summer, so you might want to use ice. Okay, ice can be useful. With ice, you have to pay attention that you only, like, if you put it next to your skin, so you go across your skin, okay? Don't put it in one spot. If you feel like you will put it in one spot and harm yourself, then please, please, please use another method that you know works better for you. Hairbrush, okay? Hairbrush or going on the skin, like, you know, something with textures, that is not, that is, that can get, or tapping with the brush, but you have to also be cautious because it is purging a lot. Any of the things you do to regulate rolls can also be purging, so you need to find, like, I cannot know you more than you, okay? I can come up with things, maybe they're good for you, maybe they're horrid for you, so please be tender with you. And of course, if that wasn't enough, then we enter to the moon ingressing into Scorpio. Applying to oppose Jupiter, squaring the Sun, and trining Saturn. So, moon in Scorpio is, you know, Scorpio is about survivalistic instinct and moon is about safety. Do I need to continue why they don't work together so easily? The trine to Saturn can allow you to be even more reflective. So I don't know if it's good or not, but it says it's not a hard aspect. The opposition to Jupiter can magnify the effect of the moon in Scorpio. And this is where Jupiter magnifies things, okay? Benefic, it means it adds. It is adding on. So if you've been emotionally turbulent, unfortunately, it can magnify it. And the square to the Sun, pull out your self-care kit for the day. Again, ice can be particularly helpful if you find this useful, especially if you are in the hemisphere where it's sunny. Perhaps warm, not hot, warm water can be good. It's not your tea, like, you know, take it to self-care, not self-harm. Yes, with all the trigger warnings involved. And later, in the next day, moon will apply to oppose Uranus. And look how long Venus is sitting pretty on the 28th degree. She is looking thoroughly at the 28th degree of Leo. I suggest you to look at what happened in the 28th degrees of Leo 8 years ago, 5 years ago. No, it's particularly 8 years ago, okay? 8 years ago, sift and sort what happened in your life. Okay? 8 years ago. 8 years ago, with 2023, that would be more 5 years, so 2015. I know what happened in my life. But you need to go to this. Venus is going over this, and she's picking and pulling and poking and things, and she's kind of like putting it under the microscope. You remember when Mercury was on the 6 degrees of Taurus, retrograde, direct retrograde direct? Okay, I nearly died internally. It was horror. It was so slow, and you try to do something, and then instead of something, let's say you want to fix your house, you want to clean the floor, okay? So usually the beginning is hard, and then you turn on the engine, and then it's easier. The beginning is hard, you turn on the engine, and you feel like it's 10 times more difficult. So you stop. You look at everything that you already want to fix, and it stayed there for like a week or 2 weeks. So this is what Venus is doing on the 28th degree, okay? She's taking a certain timeline and stretching it and looking frame by frame, by frame, by frame, by frame. And this timeline is particularly dramatic for you, okay? She's already began to do this. She's taking this particular timeline, this moment in time of the 28th degree, and she's stretching it. And she's like, let's look at here, and then this frame, and then this frame. And then you feel like your whole life is going over. You've died, and you're looking at your whole life. But where's that love buffer? again, pull up your self-care kits, because you're gonna go over this again. You're meant to purge things, but the process is a process, okay, and it's annoying. I tell you that, okay. We've all been through that. This particular moment in time in 2015, I don't need to tell you that, okay. It was not an easy moment for you, and regardless of gender, you will remember this moment in time. All the while the moon here is opposing Uranus in Taurus, moon in Scorpio, Mars, the ruler of this moon, in Virgo, Venus retrograde. Misguided action, sudden misguided action. Okay, the sudden misguided action to do with this. Okay, don't kill anyone. Lilith on the 22 degree, Uranus on the 22 degree. The moon will be opposing on the 22 degree, squaring this Lilith. Okay, please put your weapons down. Write a story. Okay, write Murder, She Wrote. Write. Use your Mercury. Okay, write. Write a poetry slam. Write a satire. Don't kill anyone. Don't kill anyone. Don't shoot anyone. Don't kill anyone. It's not the whole story yet. Venus is just retrograde. It's not the whole story. It's not anywhere near the whole story, but you definitely would like to finish somebody off, including yourself. So pull all your self-care kits together. It's a good time to use that Mercury. It's applying to this Venus, okay? Write your introspection. And yes, unfortunately, that can also be public, okay? You remember those things that led to the Me Too? Yeah, before the Me Too, okay, before people said hashtag Me Too, that was only 2017, but 2 years before that, 3 years before that, things were already happening. So we're gonna see a lot of posts, a lot of things coming back, okay? If you haven't switched the notice from your social media, or from Facebook in particular, or from this era, like, don't open a new Facebook, you know? Everything is so triggering for everyone, whichever side of the gun you were, or the pen you were, for everyone, it's so triggering. So it's the time to write Murder, She Wrote, okay? With the pen, not the gun. For everyone concerned. It's a friendly reminder to everyone concerned. So, because it's not the end of the story, and most likely here it's a purging, that's very constructive. Because, like, oh, damn, I was treating women this way the whole time, and then my penis wouldn't stand anymore. And I thought that this is because I'm old, or because I'm half alcoholic. But oh, my liver was actually fine, which was quite surprising. And I was eating fairly well. But oh, it has the thing that I was not opening my heart when I'm trying to put my penis up, and then I was coming from all very violent scenes that were making the dopamine go on a surge and surge and surge until my penis will not stand anymore, okay, or my vagina would not get wet anymore, okay, and eventually that's what it's about. It's like, oh, that whole thing happened, but because it's on our penis and vagina, okay, Venus retrograde, moon on Mars here, Rahu about to go on Mars, so we need to view our penis in a new way. It's like, hey, other than being a weapon and a gun and something that penetrates and kills and rapes, it's like, hey, that thing is also has a heart for the like the penis top, and it actually goes into the internal organs with the reflexology of our genitalia, and it's actually we can actually communicate and channel with it. Oh, it actually brings certain energies. Oh, it's actually doing so many other lovely things than to destroy ourselves in the world. It's like there's so many beautiful things a penis can do. Why not calibrate on them? And that's what this Rahu on Mars, on any Rahu on Mars, is supposed to be. Okay, we're purging that Mars that is, I'm going to get revenge. And rising that Mars was like, I'm going to delve into a whole new experience, which is Aries. Okay, I'm going to try something new. the Mars of vengeance, of baggage. We were purging it. We're already out of it. Okay, we were already out of it. But because Venus is retrograde here on this particular point, okay, we kind of reminded of all of the things that were hurting our ego, all the ways in which people try to hurt each other's egos, then that is going to be on purge. And for some of you that were on the other side of the pen, they were like, I wouldn't be believed, whether you're Johnny Depp or the general Me Too veteran, you know, whether academia or army or film industry or work or whatnot. And you were like, oh, nobody will believe me. It was like, darling, 99% of people believe you. The rest of them are either hiding skeletons in the closet or trying to make you look or feel small or feel like they have more power than they actually have at this point in time. Okay? They don't really have all this much power over you. Nobody has the power over you. Okay? The world believes you. Forget it. Okay? That thing is off. Obviously, you're not to blame here. Everybody knows that these things happen. Okay? It's not that people don't believe you, it's just that we definitely need to build new structures that allow for orgasms. The whole structures in our lives, we need to build them so that they allow for willingly consensual orgasms from everyone, whatever your genitalia is. Huh? And we need to do that. This needs to be done. So that's what I have to say about this particular Scorpio moon, and the ingress to Sagittarius, the blessed ingress to Sagittarius. Why am I saying blessed? Although it does square Venus here, and Mercury will conjunct this Venus, so you will hear a lot of dramatic words, even dramatic words revisited. Okay. And again, this is a kindly reminder that this is the time where people are going to, like, they're going to have regression. All sides of the pen are going to have regression. And you're going to say words that they haven't said in a while. It's kind of like when you have a couple and that couple has an argument, and these arguments keep coming back. They're like, I thought we were over it. And then somebody pulls in that name or pulls in that, you know, word, that cuss word or that whatnot. And then it triggers the other person. And it's just like, it's useless. Okay. But it can still happen. And this will be revisited to be purged. And since we have 8 years since the last time this happened, this purging can actually be culminating something and opening a new chapter in life, but it will take some 2 months to do that. So Moon in Sagittarius squares Saturn and Mars. Okay, trines the Sun, sextiles Pluto. We're continuing on, like, with difficult aspects. Okay, the moon is optimistic, but the actions are blocked. Okay, it's kind of like you want to say, I have an idea, and then you want to grab your computer, but there is a power cut. Okay, you say, okay, I'm going to call a friend, but that friend is abroad and they can't receive calls. And that can be quite annoying. So I'm going to write on a pen. Then you start writing and you're like, oh, my hand does not catch up to my mind, and it's so quick and it's all this and it's all that. Or you don't find the words to say that. And that could be quite frustrating, even though what you came to express is actually optimistic. Jupiter does trine Mars. So there's some attempt to take action on a certain belief that can actually be optimistic and expansive with an A, but just blocked actions, just still not the whole story. We're not ripe for this action, as the ruler of Jupiter, Venus, is getting an update. And finally, Venus moves another degree. Only now. As Mercury ingresses into Virgo, where it will retrograde. okay? The sign of his retrogression. Oh, so Moon squaring Mars, we said, and then it's sort of here, it is separate in aspect, so the Moon is void, of course. It applies to Lilith, but other than that, the Moon is void, of course, in Sagittarius. That's the easier void, of course, because the Moon is in Sagittarius is generally optimistic. It's just that we are having to reassess how are we going to perform our faith. And that's what this, it's kind of like a meditation on it. Sunday, the 30th, the Moon ingresses into Capricorn, where it's at its fall, but where it's at its detriment, fall, detriment, fall, detriment. I don't know, Scorpio and Capricorn are not the best for the Moon. Moon here trines Mercury and Venus still. So Mercury in Virgo. It squares Neptune. It separates from a square to Neptune. This is a very practical moon. It's not a flamboyant moon. It can be a bit of an anxious moon, but you can use writing or cleaning to help you with that. And again, we do have the sextile to Saturn. Everything is said about Saturn. Okay, some progress happening with Russia, marine life, healthcare system, all of the above. And it's not a good or bad thing. There can be misinformation. This is a sextile. This is not a hard aspect. The Moon will square Neptune here. So there's mixed influences. It's just ongoing thing. And last but not least, 31st of July, the Moon is still in Capricorn. We have a grand Earth trine. The Moon trines Jupiter as it trines Mars. With the ruler, Saturn opposes Mercury, that is the ruler of Mars. So there can be some action. There can be some traditional beliefs that guide certain actions, but those certain actions run into a certain block again. So there's frustration. It's kind of relief and frustration. Certain things work together, but when you come to execute, the ruler of Mars is opposing Saturn, so there is delay in action again because it's not the whole picture. And that's that. That's that. This is July. It sounds like a whole lot of reflection because we are entering this part of a whole lot of reflection. Okay, pay attention. When we have this many things on the 22 degree, it's better to pick up a pen and write a story rather than to do anything else with it. Okay, that's a reminder for everyone involved. Lots of self-care this month. There are some sweet moments here. Okay, there are sweet moments. But you just have to remember that for anything, most of the things that make us happy have to do with love, the erotic love, the coupleship love, the excitement, the starting something creative. And all of these things go through reassessment right now. And so just finding our sense of joy and ease is quite frustrating at this moment in time. While Ketu was already in Scorpio, so we're not inclined to go into we actually want ease, not intricacy. Okay? And so that's why we're even more frustrated by what's going on. And that's just the spirit of July. Okay, it's a summertime, but it's not that there are no sweet times for the summertime, but you definitely are going to have to be extra patient with yourself and others. So thank you so much for watching.